I was 64 years old when my son told me not to come to Thanksgiving dinner. "Dad, listen," Brandon said over the phone, his voice tight with discomfort. "Jessica thinks it would be better if you didn't come this year. She's inviting her parents, and you know how traditional her family is. She just thinks, well, she thinks you might say something that would make everyone uncomfortable." I held the phone against my ear, standing in my small kitchen with its outdated yellow wallpaper that my late wife had picked out 30 years ago. "Say something? Brandon, I barely say anything at family dinners." "I know, Dad, but you know how you are. The political stuff, the jokes that don't really land anymore. Jessica's dad is pretty conservative, and she just wants everything to go smoothly. Maybe next year, okay?" The worst part wasn't the rejection. It was the casual way he delivered it. Like he was telling me he couldn't make it to lunch because of a dentist appointment. "Your mother loved Thanksgiving," I said quietly. There was a pause. "I know, Dad, but Mom's been gone for 6 years. Things are different now." Different. That was the word he used. Not better, not worse. Just different. "What about Christmas?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Another pause. Longer this time. "Let's just take it one holiday at a time, okay? I'll call you next week." He didn't call the next week. So on Thanksgiving Day, I found myself sitting alone at Miller's Diner on Route 9, the only place open for miles. The parking lot was nearly empty except for a few cars, and inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a harsh white glow that made the red vinyl booths look almost pink. The waitress, a tired-looking woman in her 50s named Carol according to her name tag, brought me a menu without being asked. "Just yourself today, hun?" she asked, her voice kind but professional. "Just me," I confirmed. She nodded like she'd seen this before, like I wasn't the first person to spend Thanksgiving alone in a diner. "We've got a turkey dinner special. Comes with all the fixings. Not quite home-cooked, but it's decent." "That sounds fine, thank you." I sat there in that booth, watching the occasional car pass by on the highway outside, and tried not to think about Brandon. Tried not to picture him and Jessica and her parents sitting around a table laden with food, laughing at jokes I wasn't there to not understand. Tried not to imagine my grandson, little Ethan, asking where Grandpa was. Did he even ask? Or had they prepared him? Told him that Grandpa was busy, or sick, or just not coming this year. The turkey arrived, and it looked exactly like diner turkey should look: adequate, functional, completely devoid of love or tradition. I picked up my fork and started to eat, tasting nothing. That's when I noticed the man in the booth across from me. He was older than me, maybe 70, with white hair cropped military short and a face that had seen some things. He wore a Vietnam veteran cap and a flannel shirt, and he was sitting completely alone with a cup of coffee, not even pretending to eat. Our eyes met for a second, and I saw something there I recognized. The same hollow kind of loneliness. The same "what am I doing here" expression. He raised his coffee cup slightly in a small salute. I nodded back. We sat like that for maybe 10 minutes. Two strangers sharing the same space but not the same conversation, until a woman and two teenagers came bursting through the door, bringing with them a gust of cold November air and the sound of laughter. "There you are, Joe," the woman said, spotting the older man. She was maybe 50, with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail and a warm, open face. "I told you to wait in the car. We were just getting the pie from the O." She stopped when she saw me, and I could see her taking in the scene. Two old men, sitting alone in a diner on Thanksgiving. The saddest possible picture. The man, Joe shrugged. "Car was cold, Sarah. Figured I'd get some coffee." Sarah looked at me, then at Joe, then back at me. Something seemed to shift in her expression, like she was making a decision. "Excuse me," she said, walking over to my booth. "I don't mean to be forward, but are you here alone?" I wanted to lie, wanted to say I was waiting for someone, that my family was running late, that I had somewhere to be. But something about her genuine concern made me tell the truth. "Yes, ma'am. Just me today." She glanced at her kids, a teenage boy and girl, maybe 15 and 17, then back at me. Would you like to join us? We're just doing a simple meal here. Nothing fancy, but nobody should eat Thanksgiving dinner alone. Oh, I couldn't impose. Joe's my uncle, she interrupted, gesturing to the man with the Vietnam cap. Every year, we do Thanksgiving here at the diner. It's kind of our tradition. Started when my husband deployed 8 years ago, and just kept going even after he came back. The more the merrier, right, kids? The teenagers nodded, though with the enthusiasm typical of teenagers being told to be polite to old people. I should have said no. Should have finished my adequate turkey and gone home to my empty house. But something in Sarah's eyes, something genuine and unpitying, made me say yes. If you're sure I wouldn't be intruding. Positive. I'm Sarah, by the way. Sarah Mitchell. This is my Uncle Joe. And these are my kids, Marcus and Olivia. And that's my husband Tom parking the car. We pushed 2 booths together. And just like that, I went from eating alone to sitting at a crowded table with 5 strangers who treated me like I belonged there. Tom turned out to be a quiet, steady man with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He worked as a contractor, had done 2 tours in Afghanistan, and had the same kind of quiet competence that my own father had possessed. The meal was nothing special. Diner, turkey, instant mashed potatoes, gravy from a packet, but it tasted better than anything I'd eaten in months, maybe years. So what brings you to Miller's Diner on Thanksgiving, Robert? Sarah asked, after we'd established the basics. She had an easy way about her, making conversation feel natural rather than forced. I could have lied. Should have lied. But I'd spent 6 years lying to myself about why Brandon never called, why visits got shorter and further apart, why I hadn't met Jessica's parents despite them being married for 3 years now. My son thought it would be better if I didn't come to dinner this year, I said simply. The table went quiet for a moment. Not an awkward quiet, but a thoughtful one. Joe spoke up, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes he'd quit a decade ago. Family can be complicated. That's what he said. Said I might make people uncomfortable. And do you? Tom asked, not unkindly. Make people uncomfortable? I thought about it honestly. I'm 64 years old, and I still think Nixon was the worst president we ever had. I tell jokes that apparently don't land anymore. I don't understand half of what my grandson talks about, and I ask questions about things I probably should just Google. So maybe I do. Sounds pretty normal to me. Marcus piped up. He was the teenage boy, all limbs and acne and surprising wisdom for 15. My grandfather doesn't understand anything about technology, and he voted for someone my mom thinks is crazy. We still want him at Thanksgiving. Sarah smiled at her son. Because family shows up, even when it's complicated, especially when it's complicated. But I had shown up, I wanted to say. For 64 years, I'd shown up. I'd shown up when Brandon had colic as a baby and wouldn't stop screaming. I'd shown up to every Little League game, even the ones where he sat on the bench the whole time. I'd shown up when his mother died and held him while he cried, even though I was breaking into pieces myself. I'd shown up when he married Jessica, even though she'd looked at me like I was something that had wandered in from the street, tracking mud on her perfect white wedding. I'd shown up. And then, I'd been uninvited. Well, I said instead, raising my glass of water, here's to new traditions. We clinked our glasses together, water, soda, coffee, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, but not loneliness either. Something in between. Something like possibility. That was 9 years ago. 9 years ago, I met Sarah and Tom and Joe and Marcus and Olivia at Miller's Diner on Thanksgiving. And 9 years later, I'm still meeting them there every year. It became our thing, our tradition. The holidays, when you choose your family instead of being assigned one. That first year turned into Christmas dinner at their house. Sarah insisted, and I accepted. Then it became helping Tom with a construction project he was doing on their garage. Then it became teaching Marcus how to drive because Tom worked late shifts. Then it became Olivia asking me to help her with a history project about Vietnam, and me introducing her to Joe, who'd actually been there. Slowly, without meaning to, without planning it, I became part of their family. Not a replacement for anything they had, but an addition. Uncle Robert. The kids started calling me. Tom called me Bob. Sarah called me a blessing, which made me uncomfortable and grateful in equal measure. Joe and I became genuine friends. Every Tuesday, we'd meet at the diner for breakfast. Same booth, same awful coffee, same comfortable silence when we didn't feel like talking, and easy conversation when we did. He told me about the things he'd seen in the war, things he'd never told anyone else. I told him about my wife, about the way she'd looked at me the day before she died and said, "You're going to be okay, Robert. Promise me, you'll be okay." I'd promised. And for 6 years after she died, I'd broken that promise every single day, just existing instead of living. But now, sitting across from Joe with our cooling coffee and arguing about whether the '69 Mets or the '04 Red Sox had the better World Series run, I thought maybe I was finally keeping it. Brandon called occasionally during those 9 years. Birthdays mostly, sometimes Christmas. The conversations were brief, surface level. He'd ask how I was. I'd say fine. I'd ask about Ethan. He'd give me generic updates. He's doing great in school. I never asked if I could visit. He never offered. I stopped sending birthday presents after the 3rd year when I never received a thank you call. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. You can only extend yourself so far before you realize you're reaching for someone who's already walked away. Year 4. Sarah's father died. I went to the funeral, sat in the back, tried to be unobtrusive. But afterward, Tom found me and said, "Sarah wants you up front with the family. Says you are family." I cried at that funeral. Not for Sarah's father, who I'd only met twice, but for the daughter, who couldn't be bothered to call on Father's Day. For the grandson who was growing up without knowing me. For the life I'd imagined and the one I'd actually gotten. But I also cried with gratitude. Because I had Tom's hand on my shoulder, steady and sure. Because I had Olivia slipping her hand into mine during the service. Because I had people who claimed me when I'd been disclaimed. Year 6. Marcus graduated high school. He gave a speech at the ceremony and mentioned me. Called me one of his role models. Said I'd taught him that it was never too late to start over, to build something new. I sat in that audience with Sarah on one side and Tom on the other, and I felt something I hadn't felt since my wife was alive. I felt like I belonged somewhere. Year 7. Joe died. Heart attack. Quick and relatively painless, which is what he would have wanted. I spoke at his funeral, told stories about our Tuesday breakfasts and his terrible jokes and the way he'd cry during Hallmark commercials when he thought no one was watching. The Vietnam vets in attendance gave him a proper military send-off, and I stood there with Sarah's family, and I grieved for my friend. Brandon sent a text. "Sorry for your loss." That was it. Not a call, not a visit. A text. I didn't respond. Year 8. I moved. Sold the house with the yellow wallpaper and bought a small condo closer to Sarah and Tom. The house had been too big, too full of memories, too empty of life. Tom helped me pack. Marcus helped me move. Olivia helped me decorate the new place with furniture that wasn't 30 years old. "This is a good fresh start, Bob," Tom said, standing in my new living room with its modern paint and functional furniture. "You deserve this." Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. But I was taking it anyway. Year 9 started like all the others. Thanksgiving at Miller's Diner. Though now the table was bigger because Marcus had a girlfriend and Olivia had brought a friend from college. We talked and laughed and ate our adequate turkey, and I felt the same warmth I felt every year. The same sense of chosen family. And then, 3 weeks later, my phone rang. "Dad?" I almost didn't recognize Brandon's voice. It had been months since we'd spoken, and even then it was just a brief birthday call in October. "Brandon, Dad, He paused, and I could hear something in his voice I hadn't heard in years. Fear. "I need to talk to you about something." My first thought was Ethan. Something had happened to Ethan. My heart lurched. "What's wrong? Is it Ethan? Is he?" "Ethan's fine. It's me, Dad. I'm sick." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "Sick how?" "Cancer. Pancreatic. Stage 3. They caught it during a routine physical 2 months ago. I've been doing treatment, and it's not going great. I sat down heavily on my couch, the phone pressed against my ear. 2 months? You've known for 2 months, and you're just now telling me? I didn't want to worry you. Didn't want to worry me. For 9 years, he'd barely spoken to me, and now he didn't want to worry me. What do the doctors say? I asked, my voice carefully neutral. They're optimistic, but it's aggressive. I'm doing chemo, and they're talking about surgery. It's a lot, Dad. And Jessica, he trailed off. What about Jessica? Another pause. She left. 3 weeks ago. Said she didn't sign up for this. That she needed to think about her future and Ethan's future. She took Ethan and moved in with her parents. The same parents who were too traditional and conservative to have Thanksgiving dinner with me. The same parents whose perfect daughter had convinced my son I wasn't good enough for their table. I should have felt vindicated. Should have felt some grim satisfaction that the woman who'd pushed me out had shown her true colors. But all I felt was sadness. Sadness for Brandon. Sadness for Ethan. Sadness for all of us and the years we'd wasted. I'm sorry, I said. And I meant it. Dad, I know we haven't been close. I know I should have called more, should have visited, should have stood up to Jessica when she said those things about you. I wanted her to be happy. And she was always so stressed about family stuff, and it seemed easier to just push me out. I finished. Yeah. His voice broke slightly. I'm so sorry, Dad. I was a coward, and I was wrong, and I don't deserve to even be calling you now. But I don't have anyone else. My friends are all busy with their own lives, and Jessica's gone, and I'm scared. I'm really scared. I closed my eyes. 9 years. 9 years of Thanksgivings at the diner, of Tuesday breakfasts with Joe, of helping Marcus learn to drive and Olivia with her homework. 9 years of building a life without my son in it, because my son had decided I didn't fit in his life. Where are you now? I asked. At home. Our home. My home. I don't know. It feels empty without Ethan. Have you talked to him? Jessica lets me FaceTime him 3 times a week. Court mandated. We're getting divorced, apparently. She filed last week. Part of me wanted to say good riddance. Part of me wanted to ask why he was calling me now, after all this time, only because he had nowhere else to turn. Part of me wanted to hang up and go back to my life. The life I'd built without him. But a bigger part of me, the part that had shown up for every Little League game and held him when his mother died, couldn't walk away. I'll come over, I said. Really? Give me 40 minutes. I hung up and sat there for a moment, thinking. Then I called Sarah. Hey, Robert, she answered, her voice warm and familiar. What's up? I told her everything. About Brandon, about the cancer, about Jessica leaving, about the call asking for help after 9 years of silence. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? She asked finally. I'm going to go see him. I'm going to help him if I can. But Sarah, I paused, trying to find the right words. I'm not going back to being the dad who gets pushed aside when it's convenient. I can't do that again. Good, she said firmly. You help him because that's who you are. But you protect yourself too. You're allowed to do both. I drove to Brandon's house, the house I'd only been inside once. Briefly, when they first bought it 6 years ago. It was a nice colonial in a good neighborhood. The kind of house that screamed upper-middle-class success. Jessica's car was gone from the driveway, but Brandon's was there, along with a car I didn't recognize. Brandon answered the door, and I was shocked by how he looked. He'd always been slender, but now he was gaunt. His skin had a grayish tinge, and his hair was thin, though I couldn't tell if that was from the chemo or stress or both. He looked older than his 42 years. He looked sick. Dad. His voice cracked. You came. Of course I came. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, and then he stepped aside to let me in. The house was beautiful, hardwood floors, expensive furniture, family photos on the walls. I noticed there wasn't a single picture of me. Not one. The hospice nurse just left, Brandon said, gesturing vaguely. She comes 3 times a week to check on me, help with medications. I'm not on hospice yet, but they wanted to get everything set up in case. In case the treatment doesn't work, he didn't say. We sat in his living room, and I listened while he talked. About the diagnosis, about the treatment plan, about how Jessica had been supportive at first, but then gradually pulled away. About how she'd told him she deserved better than being a young widow, that she had to think about Ethan's stability. She said some other things too, Brandon admitted, not meeting my eyes. About how she'd already sacrificed enough by marrying into a family with problems. About how she didn't want Ethan influenced by certain attitudes. I think she meant you, Dad. I think a lot of the problems she talked about were about you. I know, I said quietly. I should have defended you. Should have told her she was wrong. But I loved her, and I thought if I just kept the peace, if I just made everyone happy, it would all work out. You can't make everyone happy, son. I learned that too late myself. He looked up at me then, and I saw tears in his eyes. I wasted so much time. All those years I could have had with you, and I chose her instead. And now she's gone, and I'm sick, and I might not have much time left. The doctors said they're optimistic. Dad, I'm stage 3 pancreatic cancer. I've done the research. The 5-year survival rate is less than 15%. I need to be realistic. We sat there in silence for a moment, and I felt the weight of all those lost years between us. All those Thanksgivings I could have spent with him. All those birthdays, all those ordinary Tuesday afternoons. But I also felt the weight of the years I'd spent building something new. The family I'd chosen, who had chosen me back. I'll help you, I said finally. I'll take you to treatments, help you around the house if you need it. I'll be here for the medical stuff. Thank you, he breathed. Thank you so much. I don't deserve. But, I continued, and his face fell slightly. I need you to understand something. I'm not going back to being the dad you call when it's convenient. I'm not going to be pushed aside again when things get better, or if Jessica decides she wants to come back, or if you meet someone new. I have a life now, Brandon. I have people who depend on me, and who I depend on. I have a family. I know. I understand. I just need help right now. I know you do. And I'm giving it. But on my terms this time. Over the next few months, I kept my word. I took Brandon to chemotherapy appointments every Tuesday and Thursday. I'd sit in those sterile waiting rooms, watching other families deal with their own tragedies, and I'd think about Joe, about those Tuesday break things we used to have. I helped Brandon around the house when he was too weak to do it himself. Grocery shopping, cleaning, laundry, the mundane tasks of living that become mountains when you're fighting for your life. But I didn't stay over, didn't rearrange my whole life around his crisis. On Fridays, I still had dinner with Sarah's family. On Sundays, I still went to Tom's house to watch football. On Wednesdays, I volunteered at the Veterans Center, something Joe had gotten me into before he died. I was there for Brandon, but I didn't disappear into being there for him. Jessica called me once, about a month into Brandon's treatment. Robert, I wanted to talk to you about Ethan, she said, her voice measured and careful. What about him? He's been asking about his father, and I think it might be good for him to visit. But I'm concerned about the environment. I don't want him to be upset or scared. Then bring him by, I said simply. Let him see his father. I was thinking maybe you could supervise? Make sure everything is appropriate? I trust you more than I trust Brandon's judgment right now. I almost laughed. She trusted me now that I was useful. Jessica, I'm happy to be there when Ethan visits, but I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for them. She was quiet for a moment. I understand. Thank you. Ethan came to visit the next weekend. He was 12 now, tall and lanky like his father had been at that age. He looked at me with curious eyes, trying to place who I was. Ethan, this is your grandpa Robert, Brandon said. You probably don't remember him. Hi, Ethan said shyly. Hi there, buddy. I've heard a lot about you. We spent the afternoon together, the three of us. Brandon was having a good day, strong enough to sit up and talk, to laugh at Ethan's stories about school and soccer. I stayed in the background mostly, just present, just there. When Jessica came to pick Ethan up, the boy hugged his father tightly and whispered something I couldn't hear. Brandon's eyes filled with tears, and he hugged back. As they were leaving, Ethan turned to me. "Are you going to be here next time?" I looked at Brandon, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "If you want me to be," I said. "Okay, yeah, I'd like that." The visits became regular. Every Saturday, Ethan would come, and I'd be there. Sometimes Brandon would be strong enough to play board games or watch movies. Sometimes he'd sleep through most of the visit, and I'd just sit with Ethan, getting to know my grandson for the first time in his life. He was a good kid, smart, thoughtful, with his father's sensitivity and, I like to think, maybe a little of my stubbornness. He asked about his grandmother one day, and I told him about her, about how she made the best apple pie and sang off-key in the car, and always knew the right thing to say when you were sad. "I wish I could have met her," Ethan said. "She would have loved you," I replied. And I meant it. Brandon's treatment progressed, some days better, some days worse. The chemo made him sick and weak, but the tumors were shrinking. Slowly, marginally, but shrinking. The doctors were cautiously optimistic, which was better than cautiously pessimistic. And through it all, I maintained my boundaries. I was there for the appointments, for Ethan's visits, for the bad days when Brandon needed someone to just sit with him. But I didn't give up my life, didn't cancel plans with Sarah's family, didn't stop volunteering, didn't move in or rearrange everything to center Brandon's crisis. It wasn't easy. Part of me felt guilty, like I should be doing more, like a good father would drop everything. But I'd been a good father for 64 years, and where had that gotten me? Uninvited to Thanksgiving dinner because I made people uncomfortable. Sarah understood. "You're allowed to have limits," she told me one Friday over dinner. "You're allowed to help him and still have your own life. That's not selfish, Robert. That's healthy." Tom agreed. "You've shown up for him when it mattered. But you don't owe him everything. No one owes anyone everything." Even Marcus, now 24 and working as a teacher, weighed in. "My students always want to know if it's okay to say no to parents who weren't there for them. I tell them, yes, you can love someone and still protect yourself from them. Sounds like you're doing both." 8 months into the treatment, Brandon got good news. The tumors had shrunk significantly. Surgery was now an option. The doctors scheduled it for 3 weeks out, and for the first time in months, there was genuine hope. "I'm going to beat this," Brandon said, sitting in his living room looking more like himself than he had in months. "I'm going to get better, and things are going to change. I'm going to be a better father to Ethan. A better son to you." I wanted to believe him, wanted to think that cancer was a wake-up call, that Jessica leaving had taught him something, that these months of leaning on me had rebuilt our relationship into something real. But I'd learned to be cautious with hope. "I'm glad you're getting better," I said carefully. "I really am. When I'm through this, when I'm healthy again, I want us to do Thanksgiving together. You and me and Ethan. A real Thanksgiving. Not at a diner or with strangers. Family." And there it was. The thing I'd been waiting for without realizing it. The test. "I do Thanksgiving at Miller's Diner," I said quietly, "with Sarah and Tom and their family. I've been doing it for 9 years, Brandon. It's my tradition." His face fell. "But I'm your son, and they're my family. I know I messed up, Dad. I know I pushed you away, but I'm trying to make it right. Doesn't that count for something?" "It does," I said. "It counts for me being here now, for me taking you to treatment, for me being here with Ethan. But it doesn't mean I give up the life I built when you decided I wasn't good enough for yours. That's not fair, isn't it?" I asked, and I felt a surge of something I hadn't let myself feel in months. Anger. For 9 years, Brandon, I didn't exist for you except when it was convenient. You didn't call, didn't visit, didn't include me in your life. And I accepted that. I moved on. I built something new, and now you're sick and scared and alone, and suddenly you want family. But where was that when I was sitting alone at Miller's Diner that first Thanksgiving? I know I was wrong. But people change, Dad. I've changed. Maybe you have. I hope you have. But I've changed too. And part of that change is knowing my worth, knowing that I deserve more than being someone's last resort. We sat in silence, and I could see him processing this, expecting maybe that I'd cave, that I'd forgive everything, and go back to being the dad who showed up no matter what. You can join us at Miller's if you want, I said finally. When you're better, if you want to, you're welcome at our table. But I'm not abandoning the people who were there for me when I had nobody. Even though I'm your son, especially because you're my son, because you should understand what it means to show up for people, what it costs when you don't. The surgery went well. The doctors removed the tumors, and Brandon's prognosis improved dramatically. He'd need ongoing monitoring, more treatment, but the immediate crisis had passed. He was going to live. I stayed through his recovery, helped him through the worst of it, and when he was finally strong enough to be on his own, I started coming back, not disappearing, but returning to my regular life, the life I'd built. Ethan kept visiting, and that relationship continued to grow. Jessica softened slightly, enough to allow unsupervised visits, enough to admit, in a moment of rare honesty, that she'd been wrong about me. I thought you were a bad influence, she said one day when dropping Ethan off. I thought you were behind the times, inappropriate. But I was wrong. You've been the most consistent thing in Brandon's life through all of this. In Ethan's life, too. Thank you, I said. Because what else do you say? I don't suppose there's any chance. She trailed off. Of what? Of things going back to how they were? Of us being a family again? I looked at her. This woman who had convinced my son I wasn't good enough for Thanksgiving dinner. And I felt nothing. No anger. No resentment. Just a kind of bemused distance. Things can't go back, Jessica. They can only go forward. And I think we all need to figure out what forward looks like. Thanksgiving came again. Year 10 of my new tradition. Brandon was healthy enough to come if he wanted. I'd invited him, told him the time and place, made it clear he was welcome. He didn't come. Instead, he sent a text. Having Thanksgiving with Ethan. Just the two of us. Hope you understand. I did understand. I understood that he was rebuilding his own life, figuring out his own path forward. I understood that maybe he needed this. Needed to establish something with his son before he could include anyone else. Or maybe he was still punishing me for not coming back on his terms, for not dropping everything and making him the center of my universe again. Either way, I was okay with it. I sat at Miller's diner with Sarah and Tom and Marcus and Olivia and Marcus's wife and their new baby. I sat at that crowded table with people who chose me, and I felt grateful, not bitter about what I'd lost, but grateful for what I'd found. You okay, Bob? Tom asked quietly. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I'm okay, and I sit at that table now, looking at the family I chose and who chose me back, and I think about the rejection, the phone call, the years of silence. I think about the cancer scare that brought my son back into my life, but not into my heart in the same way. I think about boundaries and growth and the difference between forgiveness and reconciliation. I think about how showing up for someone doesn't mean losing yourself in them. Brandon and I talk now, more than we did before. We're building something new, something different. He's learning to be a father to Ethan without Jessica. I'm learning to be a grandfather on my own terms. It's not what either of us imagined, but it's real. And Sarah's family? They're still my family too. Both things can be true. You can have more than one family, more than one tradition, more than one place you belong. I'm 64 years old. Wait, no. I'm 73 now. 9 years have passed since that first Thanksgiving at Miller's Diner. And I've learned something in those years. Something I wish I'd known earlier. It's never too late to start over. It's never too late to set a boundary. It's never too late to find out who you are when you're not busy being who everyone else needs you to be. And sometimes, the family you find is just as real as the family you're born into. Sometimes more so. I take another bite of adequate diner turkey, surrounded by laughter and warmth and people who show up. And I think, I'm okay. I kept my promise. I'm okay.